This is the Money Hour with your host, Tina Mitchell, on Alternative Talk, AM 1150. Now, back to the show with local mortgage and finance expert, Tina Mitchell.
Welcome back to the Money Hour with your host and mortgage expert, Tina Mitchell, right here on 1150 AM KKNW, the Saturday, June 28th show. I'm dedicated to my listeners, providing you with the tools needed to make informed decisions on all matters that can affect your money. And if you're hearing my show at a different time or day, you're listening to a rebroadcast, to talk with me or to any of the guests that I have in studio, you can call the show at 1-855-400-1150. Again, that's 1-855-400-1150 or online at themoneyhour.com. And in his studio right now, Jeff Dickenson with REMAX on the Lake. We're having a conversation about real estate contingencies, which are an important part of the contract and understanding how to protect your earnest money. And Jeff, thank you again for coming into studio.
Always excited to be here.
It's been a little while. Been a little while since I've had you in.
It has.
So a little background about Jeff. Over the years, Jeff has been involved in the development of apartments, office building, residential condominiums, and self-storage facilities. His real estate practice includes extensive buyer and seller representation of residential properties throughout the Puget Sound region. Jeff is also the founder and director of REMAX Home Advantage Program, one of the most successful real estate teams. The primary focus is corporate employee representation, with over 90 corporate clients, including Boeing, UW, King County, City of Seattle, and Harborview Medical Center. So quite a list of companies there, Jeff. And again, just an industry leader. And that's why I like to have you come in and share your expertise in studio. So we're talking about contingencies, Jeff. When purchasing a property with your purchase and sale agreement signed between the buyer and seller, there are contingencies in the contract that specifies the contract will cease to exist upon occurrences of these certain events. So can you talk about how this protects the buyer and how it protects the seller?
Definitely, Tina. It's interesting. As I started in real estate 32 years ago, and when I started, it was a one-page document that was all seller-oriented, so buyer beware. Over the past 15, 20 years or so, the documents have totally gone the other way to being buyer-oriented. Mm-hmm. So there are a number of contingencies that protect the buyer in the purchase and sale agreement. Some of the most notable ones, certainly the home inspection contingency, which is protecting the buyer typically 1 to 10 days after purchase or after what we call mutual acceptance. You've got a 3-day Form 17 seller disclosure, which allows a rescission if the buyer sees something in that document. You've got the finance addendum, which often protects the buyer for the first 30 days of purchase. You've got a lead-based paint addendum that protects for 3 days. So there's a number of different contingencies that could be employed if the buyer wanted to get out of the contract. Now, on the seller's side, again, the documents are pretty buyer-oriented. So the seller only has a couple of them in there that they can employ. One is on the home finance. They could push the buyer to clear their home finance contingency quicker just by being on top of things and making sure that the buyer's lender is providing all the information and things are moving forward nicely. The other one would be in the case of a home sale contingency, there's a bump clause, so typically 1 day. So if there's a buyer out there that the sale is contingent upon them selling their home, which we see very infrequently these days, very common 32 years ago, that another buyer comes along and offers to close in 30 days, they could bump the other buyer from that.
Yeah, and 32 years ago, just probably referencing just because it was a different market than it is right now. It's just you have to have the best and the least amount of contingencies moving forward to get your offer looked at. But just on that note, if you can't seem to get an offer accepted, there's always options for bridging that gap there temporary. So, call the show and I'll let you know on that. And so just really quickly on I know that there's things that are getting added as well to contingencies, like the appraisal and making some adjustments there. There's contingencies that are getting waived. And so there's a lot of creative things that have to be done in this market, but just understanding what those contingencies are, what you need to do to protect your earnest money, and knowing in some situations you've got to release some of those in order to get your offer accepted. So Jeff, let's talk about the earnest money. The earnest money is a good faith deposit from the buyer, and it's a check that they're going to be writing out. Used to be 1% to 3%. 3% was really, really high, 1% being the average. And now it's closer, 3% is kind of a minimum or an expected amount right now. Is that correct, Jeff?
Well, I'm still seeing a lot of 1% out there. But, I think, what I advise my clients, if they're going to be putting 20% down on a purchase, and it's a $300,000 home, 1% of course is $3,000, but I would put $5,000 or $10,000 to show more seriousness. And most likely you're going to beat out another competing offer.
Yes.
Just because of that element.
And as long as you have those contingencies protected,
right,
then you're okay.
Absolutely. It is kind of hard to lose earnest money these days. 15 years or more ago, it was very easy to lose your earnest money.
Yeah, and why was that, Jeff?
Well, again, the documents have become so buyer-oriented, and I think this was due to the timeshare industry and just the state being much more consumer protective.
Makes total sense. No, it is hard to lose it as long as you have the right representation. And I mean, and you conduct your business with obviously such a high level of expertise, but unfortunately there's a lot of representation out there that is not watching the time clocks. They're not doing things that they need to. They're giving advice, and it might not be the best advice, or really educating on how they're advising their clients when it comes to the earnest money. So you do have to be careful to make sure that you have the right representation to make sure you're getting that protected. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yeah, I'm a big professor of that, Tina. There's 15,000 real estate agents in the Puget Sound area. Too many in my opinion. And the average agent is doing 4 transactions a year, and it's really not enough to be proficient in the purchase document. So if you're out there interviewing real estate agents to represent you, I would one of the questions I would ask is how many transactions have you done in the last 6 months or a year?
Great question.
To get
How many transactions have you done in the last 6 months, Jeff?
I do about 50 to 60 a year. So
unbelievable.
Do the math.
Yeah, exactly. Now, so there are a few standard contingencies with a traditional real estate contract, and let's start out with the first contingency, which is the home inspection. And you mentioned that a little bit more on that, Jeff.
Yeah, probably one of the most important contingencies there is in most real estate transactions. So the home inspection contingency allows the buyer a certain period of time. The documents default to 10 days, but in this competitive market, I'm seeing more 3 days, more 5 days. And what's interesting in the state of Washington, anything less than 7 days does not include holidays or weekends. So, 5-day contingency could actually be 7 days. So, as you're trying to formulate a competitive offer. The other thing we're seeing in certain markets, let's take Klahani up in Issaquah, let's take Ballard in Seattle. We're seeing so many sales go where buyers are waiving the home inspection contingency. Quite scary for most buyers.
Well, what do you say? What are you seeing as far as the pre-inspection? If they don't want to waive it, there's still an option there for them?
There is. Most sellers are allowing buyers to do a pre-inspection, but what's interesting is I've seen home inspectors climbing over home inspectors for the same house. So it's a little disconcerting to say, geez, are we going to really have a chance at this when so many other people are doing the same thing?
I think the seller should just get a home inspection, leave it out there for everybody, and the buyer could decide if they want to utilize that to go in without their inspection or get their own. That's a whole nother conversation there. So Jeff, during the inspection contingency, let's say that they do move forward and they do have an inspection contingency. They're not doing a pre-inspection or waiving that contingency, and there's issues that come up on the property. What are you seeing happening?
Well, for the most part, we're seeing the seller taking care of those, unless they really play hardball. If there's another buyer, out of 5 offers that's willing to step up to the plate, we're seeing that happen as well. But I would say that probably 95% of the time the seller is correcting that. We try to employ a strategy to put the guilt trip on the seller. Most buyers are expecting the roof to be in good condition as a standard element of a house. So, when we can tell them that the lender's not going to lend money on the house, then
they're going to call it out if the roof is bad.
Exactly. So the seller, tends to have that aha moment to go into to fix that. Otherwise, you'd have to go into either a rehab type of a loan where we're putting the burden on the buyer, or two is a price adjustment, maybe upwards for say $7,000 to put a new roof on the house. So,
makes total sense. So another big contingency is the appraisal and what they're doing in that process of getting more creative on the least amount of contingencies for the seller, and making adjustments and waiving that up to a certain amount. I mean, that's right. Getting kind of crazy what's happening there. But talk about the appraisal contingency.
Well, that's another good protection for the buyers. So in the rare occurrence, I don't see it happen very often that the appraisal comes in and let's say it's $5,000 lower than what was offered. Certainly the lender will only lend on the appraisal amount. So we have this $5,000.
Or the price, the lower of the two.
Right, exactly. So again, I'm going to say 95% of the time the seller is acquiescing and making that adjustment so that the sale can go forward. The other 5% is either challenging the appraisal, coming up with new comps. I would say that's happening. I'd say that's happening the most in this situation. Or the final one is the buyer. If they really want it, they've got to come up and bring another $5,000 to the table. So
what are you thinking with this craziness with the appraisal? And I've seen this on a few. Let's just let's use a $500,000 home, $500,000 home. They know it's going to get bid up, and it was listed low anyways to get these crazy multiple offers. So ultimately, it's probably going to go for $600,000. Right. The reality, but it is a reality, and it is happening in these prime areas. But so that they're putting in there that if the appraisal comes in low, they'll pay anything over and above a certain amount. So maybe they're willing to go all the way up to $550. Right. So if the appraisal only comes at $500, they'll pay that after other $50,000. What are you seeing with that, and what's your advice there, Jeff?
Well, I'm finding myself with some of my clients winning a lot of offers just being in second position because it gets bid up so high.
Nice.
They go away.
That is awesome.
So I thought
That's really great. I haven't heard anyone say that. It makes total sense.
Yeah. So I am seeing a little bit of a pattern that way, but no, it's just absolutely crazy out there that it just gets into this crazy frenzy with these
what
these
a
buyers,
great thing that you just said, Jeff, though, because don't give up, make those offers, because if something happens at the end in that situation, these sellers are pretty darn stressed out, and they want to get this thing completed. So get all your ducks in a row, and who knows, you may be that backup offer when something falls apart. Yeah.
Backup offers are big these days.
Yeah, no kidding. So Jeff, we're running out of time. I want to give you a sec just to give your last advice here on contingencies before I take it to break.
Yeah, I think the main thing is really sit down with your real estate agent and look at the tools you have in front of you when making an offer in a competitive market. A heartfelt letter from you, the buyer, goes a long way in today's market. I'm going to say we probably see 2 out of 100 purchase offers that have a letter. So a good strategy there.
Well, Jeff, thank you so much again for coming into the studio. Excited to have you back, and keep doing up all the good work that you're doing with our buyers and sellers here in the local market, and all that you're doing with our companies, especially with the people coming in and into the area here in our beautiful, amazing Seattle.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tina.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.
Coming up next on the Money Hour, what critical issues are going on in our region and how they're going to possibly affect you. Randy Banneker with Banneker Public Affairs right here on 1150 AM KKNW after this short break.